Welcome back, friends, to the latest episode of the Performance Mindset Podcast. Our goal is to really focus on commercial real estate as well as leadership. So if you're looking to grow, you are tuning into the right show. I'm your host, Amy Calandrino, and I'm founder and CEO of Beyond Commercial. If you go to beyondcommercial.com, you'll see our latest listings as well as market updates, and it's a great wealth of information. Be sure to visit there. So today I'm really excited to have with me Bob Gentle, and we have now been working together. He's been helping me with my personal brand, as well as he's been a great business coach. He has a business called AmplifyMe. And also, friends, if you're watching on video, you'll see I'm in some new digs. We waved some magic pixie dust, and while I was at Disney this weekend with my family, I had a move management company come in and set up my office. And so I am already just 2 or 3 business days from closing on this house, and I'm already recording podcasts again. So super cool. So welcome to the show, Bob.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, especially under such probably chaotic circumstances for you. I really appreciate that.
So, yeah, I hired them so I could basically still kind of work, which I did while I was at Disney in between a little bit. But then Monday, Tuesday, it's like, oh, wait, we don't have water to the house, or we don't have gas to the house, and we don't have internet, and da-da-da-da-da. And I thought all those things went through. So anyways, but we're pretty well settled now. And, we have some clutter in the garage, but it's nothing. It's like, it's fine. It'll all get set, get figured out. So yeah.
As long as you have somewhere to sleep, what else really matters?
Yeah. So tell me about your journey into where you're at today. And I know you have your own podcast. So if you want to talk about what you do, maybe a little bit about your podcast and how you kind of landed where you're at today, that would be great for our listeners.
Thank you. So yeah, I come from a traditional digital marketing agency background. That sounds a bit weird, a traditional digital marketing agency background, but I've been doing digital since the late 90s. It's really been my wheelhouse.
Wow.
And I kind of moved through doing marketing for companies to realizing that usually in most organizations where they've been successful, it's often because there's been charisma. One person really led, and they led well, and their personal brand shone, and the company kind of grew up around them. And I really wanted, A, to understand that, and B, lean into supporting that for what you might call the small business owner, the solopreneur, the micro business owner. Microbusiness, small business, not meaning small in revenue necessarily, but smaller organizations where, I don't know if you're probably one of nature's outgoing people, if I'm right, Amy. But there are many people who are the traditional wallflowers, the underdogs. And I really wanted to see some of those people shining. So recognizing I am one of those people, I am a painfully shy introvert. And in order for me to support my clients doing what I wanted to do, I also had to walk the walk, because as you'll recognize, building a personal brand, being very high profile, is just as much an inner journey as it is an outer journey. That in order for you to grow into a really strong leadership brand, you also have to grow into a really strong leader. So for me, that's kind of led to where I am now, where I'm helping people build, market, and monetize strong leadership brands.
It's so interesting. Well, first thing, 2 things I want to circle back to that we just talked about. You talked a little bit about when you start to build your brand, it's a bit of an inner journey. And I've really found that because you really need to know your why and what is your purpose? What are you intentionally pursuing? And then your whole entire personal and professional life can kind of like follow suit. And so I've found the more that I'm putting myself out there, the more that I'm able to kind of express that narrative that I've kind of come up with for myself. It's authentic. Like, this is who I am. But as I've gone through this, instead of just throwing random things out there. People want to know why, what makes Amy tick, what's different about Amy. You know, I'm a woman leader. I love small business. I have way too many hobbies. And so always wanting to learn a lot of new things. I love being a mom, you know, all those things. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, some of the inner journeys you've seen or even yourself personally?
Well, yeah, I remember when I was at the very beginning of this journey, I was a wonderful, what you might call technician. I really knew my stuff, but I wasn't doing my stuff. I was doing it for other people. I was telling them what to do. And I knew for me to do the work that really lit me up, more people needed to know about me. There wasn't enough opportunity in my small local environment for me to really just focus on doing that one thing. So I needed people all over the country and now all over the world to know who I am. So those people who, and they're not everywhere. My ideal client, they're a unicorn. But I needed them to know about me. And I remember being at a conference, and the conference's focus was personal branding. Being at a table full of business owners, nearly in tears, because I needed to tell them, look, I don't know what's going on. I can't post a selfie. I'm terrified. And I remember having this moment where I realized, Bob, you need to have just stop a moment. Because what nobody at that table knew was I spent 15 years working in search and rescue. I was really comfortable doing terrifying things for most people. I would jump out of a helicopter. I would swim out into the middle of the sea at night. I would abseil down cliffs and recover bodies. Perfectly happy. But I couldn't post a selfie. So I just realized in that moment, how do we train people to do really scary things? We do it through a gradual process of desensitization, through normalization over time. So for me, I then went through a program of just gradually becoming accustomed to doing what for most people are really weird things. If we're honest, for most people, and I find this all the time, I know you're not one of these people, but the majority of people find the idea of posting a selfie on LinkedIn intimidating as hell. Once you've done it a few times, it's normal.
Yeah.
So for me, partly being around people that are doing unusual things normalizes these strange entrepreneurial behaviors, but also understanding what is it I'm actually scared of? What's triggering fear? Shining a light on that. And what you'll find as soon as you shine a light on it, it kind of shrinks and you can start spending time with it. So for me, it's just a gradual process on the one hand of being very aware of what's triggering fear and moving in that direction, because that's where you'll find most growth. And I guess constantly looking for those opportunities. So that's my journey. It's very, very varied, to be honest, but it's one of bringing fear to awareness and then desensitizing yourself to those things that trigger it.
I do have a healthy fear of failing. It's something I've had to push through and like just be okay with failing and being okay with things not being perfect. When I first started this podcast, I almost thought about just doing it monthly because I was afraid of not having enough guests, and I was having ironically enough, I'm having this podcast about having a growth mindset, yet I was kind of having a scarcity mindset about it. And I was like, okay, let me do every other week because I do still feel like that's a push. It's uncomfortable. Again, I'm starting the podcast, which I did record 3 episodes and then decided I was not going to do it. And then my friend followed back up with me like, what happened to that podcast? I'm like, okay, fine, it's going. It's right. So you got to have like some accountability. But it's interesting. You touched on a few different things, like on being uncomfortable, desensitizing, kind of leaning on the fear. And so now kind of like working with you, we're realizing really for me to reach ultimate goals and this just not be this fun hobby that I plug in and talk to people, but maybe it's more impactful for my family and for other people to increase the cadence to once a week. And I started to have those feelings kind of bubble up again. Like, what if I, can't keep up with this and da, 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 da. And I'm like, no, it's gonna be perfectly fine. It's gonna be perfectly fine. And so there's gonna be some moments maybe where I start to kind of run low maybe or something like that, but it's gonna be fine. Like a lot of people are gonna want to talk to me. So just even with that. Yeah.
I think So the weekly versus versus bi-weekly podcast, there are lots of technical reasons why doing it once a week is light years ahead of doing it fortnightly or bi-weekly. But you're right, that simple thing can trigger all kinds of what ifs. But the reality is those are really important to pay attention to. A lot of the time, probably the biggest, most common trigger people experience is imposter syndrome on the one hand and comparison on the other. And most people look at these as things to move away from. Whatever it is that's triggering imposter syndrome, I need to react to that by moving in the opposite direction. And that's almost what you're describing here, is that it's a big commitment. Therefore, I should instinctively move away from it. But in moving towards it, that's often, you see, everybody else's reaction is also to move away from it. So in moving towards it, suddenly there's wide blue open space. And only a few other special people who have also moved in that direction, who are very supportive. So with the weekly versus bi-weekly podcast is a difficult example, but a lot of the time it's, so personally, I experience it when I'm reaching out to a podcast guest and I think, can I speak on this guy's level? Can I have a conversation with this world-class expert and not look like a clown? It's very rarely the case, but most people will put off reaching out to those guests because they'll go for the easy levels. But what you will almost always find is those people don't get approached as often, and they're far more ready to speak to you.
Yeah.
In addition to that, they're far more comfortable being a guest as a generous guest, and they'll see your insecurity and your humility, and they will respond with kindness and generosity as an interviewee, and you had nothing to worry about. So again, that's a bit of a specific one, but looking at imposter syndrome and comparison as a beacon rather than an alarm is probably the most useful one.
I would agree with that. And just riffing a little bit more on what your intro and all that kind of stuff, I really liked you were talking about walking the walk. And sometimes I find there are other commercial real estate practitioners that haven't purchased commercial real estate for themselves, haven't sold. I mean, I've been through multiple leases. I've now purchased 3. I've done through a 1031. I've done a sale leaseback. I've leased out my space. I've done all those different things. So I've been through the different journey, and I'm a small business owner. So I feel as though I have a bit more empathy and understanding for what people are going through. I also feel like I'm better at, working with clients. That sometimes there's some commercial real estate practitioners that they're strict like 9 to 5 and all those kinds of things, versus I've kind of built a more flexible schedule for myself so I can be accommodating, because I know you're running top speed, and then your personal stuff, which is, maybe growing your business and doing that type of quadrant, work, Stephen Covey works, like working on your business and maybe taking the meeting with me, is hard to do. So I try to be as accommodating as possible. And especially with like doctors and lawyers, they only get paid if they do procedures, or they only get paid if they're billing. And like, why am I going to be such a prima donna to like demand that they meet, at this particular time? So I've tried to build some flexibility and some empathy and some understanding. And I think that comes because I own a business and I've been in commercial real estate. So you want to talk about that a little bit for yourself?
Well, I think listening to you, and rather than talking about myself, talk about you. What's interesting there is you have walked the walk. And some of your clients will intuitively sense that. They'll know that there's a difference between Amy Calandrino and another. But there will be others who don't have that sixth sense. And one of the really interesting things about a brand, the traditional cliche answer to what is a brand, is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And for me, a personal brand is, what do people think about you when you're not in the room? What is their self-talk? And most of us leave that entirely to chance. So in your situation, you've walked the walk, but have you talked about it? Is it part of the information that's out in the world about you? Have you talked about your personal challenges, what you've overcome? Because this is the raw material. I often talk about, in terms of our content and our content marketing, we're creating a scaffold for the imagination of our audience. We don't need to tell them every detail of everything, but we need to give them enough information so their imaginations can fill the gap. It's a little bit like when you walk into an art gallery and you see an impressionist painting. When you get up close, it's just a bunch of splodges, but the brain fills in all the gaps. So we need, through our content, to create this scaffold. So I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a business owner, I have invested in these things myself. They then begin, your personal brand is associated with these things. There's another aspect of this, which for me is really powerful. What I want when somebody walks down the road and they think about the problem that I solve is I don't want them just associate my name with these things and my experience in it. I want my face to flash up in their head. I want them to see me in their mind's eye. And this is where things like selfies or video marketing become quite powerful.
Right.
Because they occupy different neural pathways in the brain, much more primal neural pathways. So if we can have our face flash up as a solution and as a competent provider of somebody who has walked the walk, now you're talking.
Right.
And I think this is why your podcast is such a wonderful tool. This is why when you're very visible on LinkedIn with selfies, these things are working in the neurology of your audience so that when they think, maybe I should buy my own place, your picture will flash up and they'll think, there's that Amy Calandrino. I really liked her. She seemed to really know what she was talking about without thinking it, without rationalizing it. You pop up as, I need to speak to that Amy person. And that's the net effect of all the work that you're doing.
Let's talk a little bit about LinkedIn. I see some people still not want to friend their competitors, and they don't really work as much to build their network. For me, if I take a call from any potential client, or if I take, I'm scheduling a showing, any of those agents on the other side, anyone I'm talking to, I'm making connections, like on LinkedIn, all those kinds of things. I don't really care if a competitor sees that I'm doing this particular, strategy or that kind of thing. I'm not worried about it like at all, but I want to build those connections because you never know. It helps to build rapport, to make it easier to do deals. Who knows? I might want to expand my team, all those different things. Can you talk about, do you have like specific LinkedIn tips for people that you recommend?
I have many LinkedIn tips. I would think, to your point specifically about competition, I often talk about when people are new to LinkedIn, they hyper-focus on the one post. As this one post that I'm about to do, it has to be the unified theory of everything according to me. And this prevents a lot of people showing up. So the first tip I would give, if you're not somebody who's regularly visible on LinkedIn, don't think about the big picture. Just think about one stitch, and that over time, the stitches create the tapestry. So this post today, it could literally be, hey, just popping in on a Friday to say hi. That's all it really needs to be. In terms of competition, people may look at one of your stitches and think, that's a wonderful stitch. It had a great impact. I'm going to copy that. But nobody's going to the effort of copying your tapestry. They would have to work very hard to do that.
Yes.
Additionally, they don't have your relationships. They don't occupy the minds of your audience in the same way. So I do not ever consider competition anymore. I live in a post-competition world. Competitors never factor into my thinking on social media whatsoever. What I'm more concerned about is cutting through. Another thing that I think answers the same question as competition is, I used to really worry about what happens if people don't like me. And I think this is the most common thing. What happens if people react negatively to me? And I realized 1/3 of people, and this is true of everybody, 1/3 of people will ignore you. 1/3 of people will not like you. But 1/3 of people will love you. That's your people. That's the only third you're creating content for.
Yeah.
Those other 2/3, they were never for you. So if they react negatively, you're
Yeah.
not behind. You're forward, because that 1/3, you touched them today. And a similar mental model that I find really helps is, we all want to attract, and we want to attract strongly. We want to attract the right people. So attraction is a form of magnetism. And if you look at any magnet, it has a positive and a negative polarity. So what that tells us in terms of human physics is, we can't have a strong force of attraction without the equal and opposite pushing others away. So what becomes apparent is, if we want to really turn up that attraction, we have to really also welcome and embrace really turning up the pushing others away. You can't have one without the other. And what that means is, authenticity is suddenly a very freeing, liberating thing. Because if you're going to turn up the attraction, wouldn't it be really cool if you were attracting people who were coming to you because of you, rather than somebody you were pretending to be?
Yes.
Or somebody you were creating in reaction to a competitor or fear? And when I understood this, I realized I don't have to be Gary Vaynerchuk or any of these other online influencers. Right. I can relax into being Super Chill Bob, who plays lo-fi music over his videos, and that's just okay. And now the people who come to me will come to me if they like me. And if they don't like me, they'll go to somebody else who they'll like better. And that's so cool, because my door only has cool people coming through it.
I always say to people, I have a no asshole policy. So like, I just put out my kind and curious vibes all the time. And if you feel like I'm too happy and too kind and it's too much and it makes you want to like throw up in your mouth, then don't call me. But I really am. I don't know. I'm dancing in the bathroom when I'm putting my makeup on. So like, that's just me. Whether, whatever I'm, doing, I try to, as much as I can, make lemonade, out of lemons. And, I've always, my husband says, I always see the silver lining in everything. Like, even when I've had just catastrophic, failures, it's okay. I learn something. So
the nice thing about that, and I think this is something that you get to experience more often than most, because you're very visible, you're very Amy Calandrino on social media.
Mm-hmm.
If we take another realtor who's spending all their time trying to look professional and to meet all these stereotypical industry expectations, they're very likely to get lots of clients coming to them for an imagined version of them. So the result is, they do get the assholes, because that's what they're attracting.
Well, there's some too, there's straight up posers online that are posing in front of airplanes, and some people legitimately have airplanes, but most of the people that I know that have airplanes don't post in front of their airplanes. They don't want everybody knowing they have an airplane, because they don't want everybody trying to get on their airplane. And it's interesting. There are some legitimate people that just literally are rolling on it and have that ostentatious kind of level of living. And that's fantastic. And I'm so happy for them. And, I don't have any jealousy about it. I like my life, and, I've constructed it that way. But if you're pretending to be that way, you're either one or two things going to happen. You're going to get other people that are pretending just as much as you are, or you do end up with someone who is, really well-to-do and everything, and they're going to figure out very quickly that you're fake. And
I think a phrase I really like that really sums this up is that your vibe attracts your tribe.
Yeah.
And the mistake most people make is, this vibe, you have to actually be transmitting. There has to be a signal there. Number one, turn the power on. And number two, make sure that signal is really clear about who you are and what your values are. And then you will attract people who are in alignment with that.
It's so interesting I feel like my life is way more synchronistic the further and further I've gotten along this journey. I think really having this podcast has amplified, this process for me and accelerated it. And it's just even little things I'm going to a listing appointment and I'm thinking of someone, and like I thought of my golf coach. And then he's literally crossing from one hole to the other hole while I'm driving down the street to see something else. And it's just like, wow, it's amazing. So, yeah. One of my friends, though, Dalee Becker, back to attracting the right clients, is she's very much herself on social media too. And she has this really big personality. Dalee Becker, if you need anything in Austin, Texas, do call her. She's amazing. But she just is like, if you don't like me, don't call me.
It sounds, there'll be people listening who think that sounds fantastic for Emmy and Bob, but I need a client to put food on the table tomorrow. And I think you do, I guess I often describe it as a process of gradually building up this personal brand to the point where it begins to work for you. But you can get very lucky quite quickly with this. And something I'm also very aware of is you can get paid for being famous. Marketing is very much, for me, and the personal brand is a large part of a marketing strategy. It's a lot like planting a crop. It's about keeping the pests off, about watering it, about making sure the sun shines. Sales is the harvest, and most people don't like the harvest. It's dirty, humiliating, degrading work. Nobody looks cool bent over in a field pulling the crops up. And in business, this is often prospecting. It's about starting conversations with strangers. It's about actually asking people, hey, I've got this product. Would you like it? Would you be interested in talking about it? And having processes to facilitate that side of things is equally important. So I think it's important for people to bear in mind we need to have marketing. It's fun, it's glamorous, but you need to balance that with sales processes. And I think this is where a lot of people avoid sales and they've replaced it with marketing. If you get it balanced across both, and I think this is why you do well, you'll thrive.
Right.
So if anybody's thinking today, things aren't quite going my way, I need to throw more into marketing, maybe take a look at your sales process and think, well, am I really being courageous in that side of things? Because sometimes that's actually where the biggest opportunity is.
One of my coaches that I've utilized before for commercial real estate is Rod Santomassimo of the Massimo Group. He's, I think, has the largest commercial real estate coaching enterprise in the US. Actually, he might even have people overseas. But anyways, he calls it vanity versus sanity. And I think, again, sanity is having, stability of income, and it actually, having things that are actually meaningful coming out of doing that. So are you just doing this to get famous? And, is this a vanity play, or is this leading to, sanity and income and those kinds of things? I really liked how he put it, because, I've fallen into times in my business where I've spent too much time focusing on operations and having the most perfect procedures or having so much marketing. And then you have to pay equal attention to your sales and your pipeline, which then leads to your finances, and then thereby leads to, you being able to hire people and the people within your organization. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I think the vanity side of things as well, a lot of people lie. A lot of people, especially in my business, there will be people who will tell you that they're nice, healthy 7-figure consulting or coaching businesses. What they don't tell you is they're spending almost the same amount of money on ads or on outsourced sales teams. They're personally not really making very much money at all.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to be very careful with who you believe, especially in my world. But yeah, everything, if you're not making the money you want, there are very few levers in business. There's visibility plus conversion equals money plus retention equals growth. That's really business in a nutshell. So
wait, go through that one by one. Okay, so you have
traffic or visibility.
Traffic visibility, yep.
Plus conversion
equals revenue.
That's both at the lead generation stage and the sales stage, equals money, plus retention or repetition equals growth.
I love that. Yeah.
We really only have 3 levers.
It's so true. I mean, again, I'm going to talk about it in my book coming up, and, I've spoken about it on the podcast, but, I had a period where I had all these people and I had all these things, but then I really wasn't realizing, success for myself, financially. And also I feel like the quality of the overall product suffered in the service. And so thereby, our growth wasn't what I want it to be because I wasn't retaining it. So I do very much agree with that. And so, yeah.
It's I say this from very bitter experience as well, that the retention side of things is a killer. I've had a very healthy, on the surface, business. I wasn't making any money.
Yeah.
So it's way more common than we realize.
Yeah. So, well, this has been amazing. So can you believe we aren't even chatting for 30 minutes?
No.
Do you have anything else you want to chat about or that we touched on that you want to dig in deeper to?
I don't think so. I think all I would ask is anybody listening, if your business isn't doing what you wish it was, be nice to yourself and understand that's actually normal. You're not the exception. Most people in business will tell you everything is wonderful. The reality is most of the time it's not. So be kind to yourself and understand that's the case. And get help. And if you are looking for help, you will possibly like my podcast. It is Building Your LeaderBrand. Really easy to find. Bob Gentle, equally easy to find on all good podcast players. But other than that, no, I think we're good.
And that's how people will find you the most, is through your podcast, or do you like LinkedIn messages, or what do you prefer?
I would love for people to connect with me on LinkedIn. Again, I'm very easy to find there. It's Bob Gentle. I think there's only one. But yeah, I'm honestly, anybody that messages me, I reply. I am not so busy that I don't have time. And it doesn't happen all that often. So I would welcome it. It's
interesting. So people don't know, but Bob's son is it called post-production? Or is it like whatever for my podcast, all the things? Yes. So, and then he introduced me to Bob like probably a year and a half ago, but I wasn't like in the state where I really wanted to make additional investments and was working to just kind of stabilize things. But now that I've been ready to really kind of go to the next level and launch my book next year and all those different things, it's been great for me. So, but yeah.
You're very kind for saying so. Usually when I go on a client's podcast, I like to keep it on the lowdown and not really, but there's no lowdown with you at all. No chance.
No, because I don't care. Again, like there's plenty of success for everybody. So I think that's the way. Yeah. So, well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the Performance Mindset podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe and download and follow and whatever all those things are, depending on what platform you're listening to. It's been a pleasure. Don't forget to visit amycalandrino.com to see pre-orders pre-orders are available of the book that is launching next year. So it is called From Perfect to Real: Ditch Perfection, Shift Your Mindset, and Thrive on Your Terms. So it's been a pleasure. Let's all keep strengthening that performance mindset. This is Amy Calandrino signing off.